All right, welcome back to Gathering Folds. Today we're folding this pattern that I probably wasn't the first person to design, but I named it Star Power. It's got these same stars that we see in just rhombi, and they're repeated over in the next position, and everything that's happening is a twist. So we're going to be folding one twist at a time. We'll be setting up some neighboring twists as we're folding some of our twists. This is a relatively advanced pattern. You can tell because these twists are very close together. And one of the things I want to emphasize in this folding is that there are techniques for folding these patterns without getting into a whole mess of pleat overlaps. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And yeah, Chris, it is surprising if you're not familiar with these tessellations to see that, okay, rhombus twists on one side and hexagon and triangles on the other. So that's kind of feeding into this idea that what you see on one side of the paper is determining what you see on the other side of the paper. And you need to take both of those sets of shapes into account in order to get through the whole thing. Now, we're not going to be folding that big extent of the pattern. I have a 32-fold triangle grid on a hexagon to work with today. But the techniques that we use to fold this much will help you fold any amount that you want. So I'm going to start on the back of the paper. I have, some slight artistic preferences about which side of the grid is the back, but if you don't have those preferences, just start on whatever side you like. And then I'm putting in a closed hexagon twist to start. So all of my mountain folds are going out to the corner of the paper, and on the right hand side my valley fold will be one grid spacing above the mountain. The very center of the pattern, the hexagon with 6 rhombi, is the pattern that I taught in Advent of Tests 2022, the first round of Advent of Tests, as day 25. So that's both an indicator of how difficult this will probably be and a resource of if it's too hard for you, go to Advent of Tests 2022 and check out some of the earlier videos that can help you reach this level. So I'm going to take this closed hexagon tower, now that I've got it 2 spaces from flat, and I'm going to bop it and grab it, give it a sharp twist, and you can see that one kind of crumpled, but I'm going to keep twisting it around and it will lay flat again using only grid lines that were already on the paper. From there, we're going to flip over to the rhombus side and start putting in our rhombus twists. So the first thing we need to know about these rhombus twists is that the through lines of the rhombi, these are going to be closed rhombus twists, those through lines are going straight to the hexagons. And then our diagonals are going in other directions. So these are spaced very close together. Our valley fold is going to come straight to that closed hexagon hole. Our mountain fold will be 1 space away. And when we start setting this up, we want to remember that we're not folding through this pleat. We're letting that open up, and that's going to allow us to then pop out from behind there another mountain fold. So remember I said these are the diagonal pleats of this twist. We want to have that mountain fold one space further out than the mountain fold coming in. And we are going to fold both the mountain and the valley. It's going to wrap around the previous pleat, or the pre-existing pleat rather. And we can then set our through line up out to the edge. And one thing to remember with these tutorials is I am pacing things so that we get through the whole thing in an hour. That is a very different pacing than trying to do things at a speed where you can follow in real time. So this is being recorded for a reason, and that's because most folders are going to need that recording in order to fold along. Now, I do recommend paying attention and watching through once continuously so that you pick up on some of these ideas and then have them already in your head when you're thinking about what to do next. So next up, we need to remember that there's another pleat under here. And we want to fold the rhombus on that pleat next. So we're going to have our valley fold in the same place along the next pleat down, or along that folded mountain. Our mountain fold one space away from the valley. And as we start setting those up and popping up our target pleat for this new twist, we see that we're running into the twist that we just made. So our new mountain fold is headed this way. And likewise, our new valley fold. And that's headed straight towards the next twist. But we don't have to go through the next twist. So this is principle number one. Never fold through another twist if you can help it. And what we can do instead is put in a triangle wrap. So the way that that works is I'm going to run this valley fold back until it hits the valley fold of the pleat that I'm tucking under. And those, you'll notice I've already started to erase this pleat. So erasing, erasing, erasing. I'm erasing back until that intersection of valley folds, and I'm letting that become a three-way intersection of valley folds, which in this particular instance is going to cause a double depth pleat under the twist that we just made. And squash. So now that we've seen how to add one rhombus after there's an existing rhombus, we can go ahead and do it again. And welcome Zach, welcome Early, welcome everyone that's watching live. And so we're making sure to untuck the pleat from under the twist we just put in, set up this overlapping pleat, and we're going to transfer, basically we're transferring this contraction in the same direction on the other side of our through line, and that is going to feed into a triangle wrap that's causing a double depth pleat under the previous rhombus. And then continuing in exactly the same way, I'm going to start to fold a bit more fluidly. We want to set up that stacked pleat and then feed in the other side into the triangle wrap. And we'll be seeing a lot more triangle wraps coming up later. We'll also be seeing compound wraps. So that's something to keep in mind. So we've got these 4, and if I want to fold the 5th, now I'm in a bit of a predicament because I have this other fold going through the area that I wanted to work on. So I'm going to undo that other fold as I set up my 5th rhombus twist as precisely as I can. And remember to get that triangle wrap with the double depth pleat under the previous rhombus. And there's still, like, I could try and air fold this, but it's not a great situation for squashing. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and find the 6th one as well. So here, what I want to do is actually to find that triangle wrap over here first. So I've marked the valley folds that are going into that. I need to pop this mountain fold down so that the valleys can go through instead. And then I'm remembering I have this 2 spaces between this valley and this mountain in here. And now that I have this set up, I can go ahead and put in the triangle wrap over here. And for some folders, they would just go ahead and set this up all the way around instead of squashing these 4 first and then squash all 6 of them around the same time. But for learning folders, I would not recommend trying to set up all 6. It becomes quite springy and hard to keep the double depth pleats in place. So from here, there's actually options of how to continue and get to something that looks pretty much like this on the front. But the way I'm teaching with Star Powered is entirely twist based. So we're going to flip over to the hexagon side and put in some triangles. And we had those triangle wraps. So we're going to use those. And notice I'm lifting one double depth pleat so I can see what's going on as I flip just one grid spacing of the next pleat over. And this is going to create a thick area because effectively it's turning our double depth pleat back into 2 single depth pleats. And then I'm going to be pressing under here to squash that closed triangle twist. And I can use my bone folder to get that fully flattened. And then as I rotate around, I won't have to lift anything off because I've already removed it. I can simply fold over that one edge of the double depth pleat, and I'm folding it over just one grid spacing and getting all of these closed triangle twists in place. And so far, this is exactly the same as the tutorial I did for just rhombi, which is in my playlist of flagstone patterns. But we're about to see some differences. And before we get too deep into it, I want to show a diagram that I made that can help to understand more of what we're doing. So this is a tiling diagram, and each shape represents a twist. They're in two different colors because twists are either right-handed or left-handed. And what we've done so far is fold the central hexagon, and then we folded one layer of twists around it, the 6 rhombi and the 6 triangles at the intersections of pleats from rhombi. You'll notice that these inner 2 hexagon boundaries are blue while the outer ones are green. That's because these boundaries are laying entirely on shape edges, while these boundaries are all cutting through particular shapes. So that's a rhombus there that's been cut through by this boundary. And when you're first starting to fold in the style where we're using what I call pseudo tiling breaks, which means we're going along, we're adding one layer of twists. In some tilings it's more, but adding a certain specified thickness layer of twists. And I encourage you to take a screenshot of this to look at later, because I'm going to be more doing this from the intuitive argument of, okay, we're adding one layer, and if we finish this rhombus, it would cause more overlap, so we're not going to do that. And having the actual diagram is super helpful in the beginning. So now that everyone's taken that screenshot, we can come back and take a look at, okay, what is it that we're going to fold next? In this pattern, the rhombus twists and the triangle twists are not in positions of rotational symmetry. So it can be a little bit confusing what to fold next. In this particular situation, I'm going to somewhat arbitrarily choose to do another triangle twist, because that is going to bound a position of symmetry, our position of twofold symmetry. And I'm going to start by saying, okay, I want my valley fold there because, so I want it there, one, because I know this pattern and I know that that's where it goes, but two, I'm using a cue that the corner of the next triangle, if we take a look in here, has to hit the corner of an existing triangle. So that's a pretty strong marker that that valley fold needs to come right here, and this pleat is the one we're putting our next triangle on. One of the things with the pseudo tiling breaks is you can always finish triangles. You can't always finish rhombi. You can never finish hexagons when you first encounter them. So that's a little bit of the setup. So if I want to have a triangle twist there with mountains in these directions, that's going to be kind of difficult because I have this other pleat right here. So what I'm going to do is open up that pleat, let my valley fold bounce until it hits the existing valley, and then create a three-way intersection. It's also going to be a three-way intersection here. And we're going to have our mountain folds creating similar three-way intersections. And this is what's called a compound wrap. So kind of like I mentioned with the pseudo tiling breaks, that there's an intuitive version and an explicit version. With the various wraps that I do, there's the intuitive version of, okay, I'm just bouncing this pleat around, and if it's going over this pleat depth, then it needs to match that distance, and I'm just bouncing it until it's happy. But then there's also the explicit version of, okay, here we're doing a triangle wrap, here we're doing a compound wrap, here we're doing something involving double depth pleats, which we won't run into in this pattern. And then I can squash this triangle twist that's even sticking out over this pleat that was passing right under it. So I've got that triangle set up, and one of the things that I know is that when I have a compound wrap, that's defining all 4 pleats of a rhombus. So flipping over, so a compound wrap can be defining 4 pleats of a rhombus, 2 pleats of a trapezoid, or 2 pleats of a hexagon. And I can see that it's defining 4 pleats of the rhombus because if I take that compound wrap, take that point that's sunk in the bottom and pop it up, boom, there's my rhombus twist. And so squashing this rhombus twist is not going to add any new pleats that the compound wrap didn't have. And so I am free to do so. And from here, I want to see, okay, now what? I know that by symmetry around the center, I can add that triangle and this rhombus all the way around. That's going to create some more overlaps in the corners, but that's also a good proxy for just seeing testing. Okay, I know this. Let me do it on the next edge also, and then see what consequences that has for whatever I want to fold next. So this is a experimental style of folding that's more true to how I actually figure out patterns than, oh, I figured it all out already and I'm just going to show you. So I'm showing you how to figure it out because I want you to be an independent folder and to be able to have pattern variations. Like let's say you want everything spaced further apart. You can do that in this tiling and still get a repeating pattern. If you used precisely these twists spaced further apart with symmetry points in the triangle and the rhombus, you'd have to change your either your triangle or your rhombus twist in order to, if you change your spacing, you need to change your triangle twist, basically, in the condensed tiling. But anyways, I have that same positioning for the next triangle. I'm going to do the same maneuver where I'm putting in a compound wrap above. And I'm noticing that as I fold this pleat down through, I'm passing through the tip of my rhombus on the other side. I can tell that with the thickness, and I can also tell based on where this slit is. It ends up being more of a box here because the triangles take away some of the paper that was compressing to form a slit for the rhombus. So this is probably not the sequence that I want to do for the rest of the repeats of this. But again, not really a problem because I can fold this triangle. I notice there's a pleat overlap here, and I know that there's a third triangle that needs to complete this meta structure because that's what I saw in the original pattern. So I'm going to set up that triangle, and when I'm setting it up, I notice that in order to get my pleats happy, I only need a triangle wrap there. That's not a compound wrap. And then here again, I have these stacked single depth pleats, and I can press to squash. Okay, so that's my solution for in the corner. I'm going to complete these 3 triangles, and I'm going to have one additional rhombus. But this other rhombus, I only have 2 of the pleats going into it. I don't have a compound wrap. I don't have all 4. If I was to finish this rhombus twist, then I would introduce a new pleat overlap down here and an extra pleat over here. So I'm going to avoid that and instead come and take this compound wrap. So I can see it's a compound wrap because there's another pleat tucking down under. In this one, it's the triangle wrap. Technically, this pleat is kind of tucking down under, but it belongs to the triangle. It doesn't belong to the rhombus. So I'm going to pop that point that was sunken down up, make sure everything is happy after I did that popping, and press to squash. So now I want to see if I can do this a little more fluidly without folding through the tip of a rhombus. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these parallel pleats. There's actually a third one under there too. I'm going to take these parallel pleats. I'm going to try to work from this one down through. So I'm going to grab that pleat and flip over. Notice it's in the opposite order now that I've flipped the paper. And I need to recognize, okay, what do I see that can help me predict what's going to happen next? And I'm seeing I need a triangle twist. Specifically, I need a triangle twist whose corner touches this one. And this is going to create a lot of pleat overlaps. It's going to be very dense up in here, but there's no wraps needed. How do I know there's no wraps needed? Well, the next pleat that I'm coming into contact with is for another twist on this side of the paper. So one part of it is feeling it out and saying, okay, I can squash this triangle twist without pulling layers inside of it. And another part is thinking more explicitly about, okay, that next pleat is also for a triangle twist on this side of the paper. It's the one with the valley in here. And this time, when we open up and start setting up that triangle twist, its pleat is coming back under this triangle twist we just made, and that is going to need a triangle wrap. So triangle wrap under the twist we just made, and then compound wrap to free us up from that pleat that was passing through here. And press to squash. And now when we flip over, we can either explicitly say, hey, I'm going to deal with that compound wrap next, or we can just flip, and then we're looking, okay, that one's a triangle wrap, this one's a compound wrap. I need to pop that up. Or we can say this is the same direction that we've been putting the rhombi, and therefore it's the one that I need to open up. And squash the twist. So one of the things that I didn't mention yet is that even though I'm working with paper, this is still pretty durable. It's a type of paper called Skytone. And if your paper is tearing right now when you're opening up those compound wraps, Skytone can be really helpful in preventing those rips. So there should be a link in the video description about where you can get Skytone. I sell it on my website, and you can get some from the manufacturer, but they don't have a ton of availability. So if you want multiple colors, definitely check out the packs on my site. And those packs also come with a bone folder, hexagon templates, clips for doing, like for making sure that things stay folded when you're taking things apart nearby, red and blue double-sided colored pencils, you know, some cool stuff to use for tessellation folding in the full pack. So I just did the same triangle that I did over here, and now for the second triangle in this little sequence, we're remembering. So, okay, I'm going to put it back and then explicitly talk through each step as I'm doing it. So when I want to put a triangle twist centered there, the first thing I want to do is open up these pleats. I'm opening up and I'm finding the mountain fold of my triangle twist. And then I want to try and resolve what's going on in here. And I'm doing that with a triangle wrap. The pleat from the previous triangle is splitting right at the corner of that triangle and heading on out. And then I want to deal with this pleat on the far side, opening up, and I'm going to pop the valley down and then figure out, okay, how many bounces does it take to get out to the edge? And with the compound wrap, that's 2 bounces. So bouncing over the mountain that I'm crossing and then bouncing against the valley that I'm hitting. And when I say bouncing, it's going to change the direction of grid line that the pleat is, or that the fold is running on. So I've got my other triangle, and flipping over, I'm going to turn that compound wrap into a closed rhombus twist. And I'm going to go ahead and fold this next repeat quickly because we've already seen it exactly in the same way twice. And one of the things that I'm trying to do as I fold is minimize stress on the paper. So I'm trying to only open up things that need to be opened and resolve tension I wouldn't say in a hurry, but with all deliberate speed. And squash. And flipping over, we have that new rhombus twist that was that had its pleats set up by the compound wrap. And then flipping over, I'm going to do this again, and there's an additional pleat in my way, which I'm just going to treat like a flat section of paper and do exactly the same things I was doing before. Folding my first triangle twist with the pleat overlaps, and then my second triangle twist with a triangle wrap under the previous triangle twist, and a compound wrap over the next pleat. And now when I flip over to fold my rhombus twist, I have this extra pleat that I need to deal with. So I'm setting up this rhombus, and it looks perfectly fine to leave that as a pleat overlap. Then I'm going to go to the opposite side of the paper, and now we're in this situation where we need another triangle to complete the group. We know where the corner of that triangle goes, right at the corner of the next one. We know where the center is, and so we can pop that open, maybe pry it open is a better word, and let the valley pop down through, and that is going to make a triangle wrap in there. And we've made it all the way around this ring around the center. So now we have our symmetry positions in the pattern, and we can refer to the rest of the pattern when we're trying to see what happens next. And this isn't, of course, the only way to continue this particular pattern. There are alternatives, but for the structure we're working on today, we have our position of twofold rotational symmetry in these bars between groups of triangles. You could also think of it as between these two rhombi that are right in line with each other. And we have our position of threefold rotational symmetry. My pen will draw the arrows in the middle of these groups of three triangles. So we're going to start hitting hexagons in the next ring around the center. And one of the great things about closed hexagons is they're super flexible about like setting up some of the pleats, but not all of them. So that's going to be very convenient for this pattern. For other patterns like Len's Garden that are in the same tiling, that's a little bit more complicated with those open hexagon twists. So flipping back to the rhombus side, we've got these rhombi that are partially set up, and that's actually a good place to start on these sets of parallel pleats, because I've got 1, 2, 3 pleats that I'm working on, and this one happens to be in the like first in the order that I'd like to work through. Part of recognizing the order that you'd like to work through comes with experience, but partly it's doing that experiment like we did on that last ring around the center of like, okay, let's set up what I know over here, see how they interact in the corner, and then decide from there, okay, do I want to go this way? Do I want to go that way? And it's a little bit experimental. And actually, this is the pattern that I'm actively working on right now for myself. And there were rings around the center where I could have gone either way, and it worked. Until I got to that last set of parallel pleats in which there was really just one way that I could cleanly work. So these techniques really scale to some crazy complex patterns. And I'm going to take that triangle wrap, and it's going to become a full rhombus twist. And you'll notice that right now, this is a really dense pleat overlap. I want to free up some of that paper, so I'm opening the pleat, the first pleat that I would cross. I'm going to turn that into a compound wrap. So one of the cool things about turning pleat overlaps into compound wraps is all of the mountain folds stay the same. I'm just rearranging how the valleys go through. And then I have more of the bulk out here and less of it in here. And with that, I can squash this rhombus twist. And I'm going to flip the paper over because this is feeding into a copy of a hexagon twist, or just into a hexagon twist. And right now, if I lift this up, I have two of the pleats going into this hexagon, and I have this other pleat that's not going into the hexagon heading off on the side. And what I want to do is find, so I've got mountain fold 1, mountain fold 2. I want to find that third mountain fold of this hexagon before I lay it down flat. And if the mountain fold's coming out here and the hexagon is right-handed, which it is, then the valley fold has to be in here. And so I'm popping down this mountain fold from the third triangle of the group of 3. And that's going to form a triangle wrap underneath. And I'm not putting in any of the other pleats of this hexagon. I'm letting it extend out like a tube. I do call this a half hexagon tube. And you'll notice as it lays down flat, these pleats are back rotating one space. So all of these are back rotated from the eventual full rotation of the twist. And so now I can flip over to this side and say, okay, what needs to happen here? I have, so it can be a little bit confusing. Here it may look like you have a compound wrap because you've got this triangle situation and you've got this pleat down below, but that pleat belongs to the half hexagon tube and we can't get rid of it. So what we actually have is a triangle wrap, and the central diamond of that rhombus is here, and central diamond of this rhombus is here, sitting on top of the triangle wrap. If it was a compound wrap, the central diamond would be under here. And we're actually going to fold both of these rhombus twists. Now, I'm going to show it, I'm going to show a bonus trick, let's say, to get these folded one at a time first. And then I'll show in the next repeat how to get that folded at the same time. At my current level of folding them at the same time is easier. It may not be for you. So we can set up this rhombus twist, and it looks like this is tightly tied in like a pleat overlap, but it doesn't have to actually be tied to the twist as it squashes. So notice I took it from here and said, no, actually that's a free layer. This is just happens to be squashing under where this pleat is. And so I can squash this rhombus twist while having that other pleat on top. I can still use my bone folder. Everything is completely flat. And then I can go and find that next rhombus twist. And now when I pull this open, I need to pop the corner of my rhombus up. It's not going to stay with this pleat coming straight out for long though, because I'm going to do a triangle wrap under the pleat from the new rhombus. And then like we saw with this rhombus in the previous time that we folded it, we're going to do the compound wrap feeding into the next hexagon twist. So in this ring around the center, we are going to be completing these kind of Penrose triangles of rhombus twists. And we're not quite done here, because this triangle wrap is going to a triangle twist, because what's on one side of this pair of rhombi is also on the other side. We had the triangle twist over there. So flipping over, we can turn that triangle wrap into a closed triangle twist. And now we have this massive pile-on of a compound wrap and another pleat that we're turning into the half hexagon tube. And again, these two pleats from rhombus twists are showing us the center of the hexagon, and then we're putting in a triangle wrap and letting this fall back and down and form that tube. I'm going to specifically say that the triangle should be the layer above. And this is kind of something that I picked up from thousands of hours of folding, where when we come back to it, when we want to interact with these pleats, we'll want to interact with this one first. So is it possible to make this with open rhombus twists? Absolutely. And actually, when we get to the end, I can go pull out my folder of like all the different patterns that I've folded with this structure. And flipping over, I'm gonna grab a drink of water. And so we've got these two rhombus twists that are set up currently as triangle wraps. And I said last time that I would show you how to do both of them at the same time. And so I'm going to start actually with the one that's laying on top and make sure I get that compound wrap that's feeding into the next hexagon squared away. And then I can pop up the next rhombus, and notice I've already got that triangle wrap set up in there. I'm going to have one new pleat headed off in this direction. And so I get these two rhombi, an extra pleat parallel to the half hexagon tube, a triangle wrap between them, single depth, and a compound wrap feeding into the next half hexagon tube. And squash. And flip over, and I can squash the triangle. And set up my half hexagon tube with a triangle wrap on the far side. I'm going to start moving faster because we've seen these moves earlier in this ring around the center. And I want to get us through the next ring around the center too, to see how those hexagons finish. So I've got those two rhombi that are aligned in the same direction, with the triangle wrap between. And one of the cool things about this technique of like having a structure and doing the pseudo tiling breaks on that structure is that I could be talking about open hexagon twists and closed rhombi on the same side as the hexagon and open triangle twists, and it would all still be the same sequence. I might have slight variations of what wraps I'm doing depending on which twists are on the same side of the paper. But as far as, okay, we're going to fold these two rhombi and there's a triangle in between and it's feeding into the next hexagon, all of that is going to be the same information no matter what choices of hexagon, triangle, and rhombus you're using. So that's the power of the tiling view, is that it's a generalization of the structure that applies to many different tessellations. And this pattern in particular, you can fit a lot of pattern on not very much grid. You can see we're getting, we're probably going to get full repeats on 32 grid divisions, which, unless you're working with an alternating pattern, is kind of rare for the things that I've been working with lately. Okay, and here I've gotten around to the last set of parallel pleats for this ring around the center, and so I have some extra pleats going on in here, and we're just going to treat them like a flat area of paper until we get through the hexagon well, the half hexagon tube, and then we can take a look at how those are going to be resolved. So the key steps that I'm using as I'm folding are first, figure out in each new ring around the center what one layer of twists looks like. And you can figure that out either by looking at the tiling diagram, which I encouraged you to screenshot earlier, or by just trying things and seeing like, oh, this is adding more pleats, this is not adding more pleats. So here I did the half hexagon tube. I have the triangle wrap that's going to be the next rhombus twist. I do know that I need to complete this rhombus twist because I see the pair of rhombi on all of my previous edges. And I'm going to pop open just the bottom pleat, and I'm remembering that I need a triangle wrap in here. I'm letting the half hexagon tube stay intact in there, and I can get my new rhombus twist. Okay, so once I squash this triangle, I'm in a position to start the next set of parallel pleats. And now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 on screen. 1, 2 for the hexagon, and 4 parallel pleats. And in this situation, I think it might be easiest to start with the half hexagon tube, and we'll find out. So I want to have space for my next rhombus in there. I can see that this pleat is coming under the triangle, and that's a dead giveaway that I need a compound wrap, but also it's going to be a rhombus twist in there, so that's another giveaway that it's going to be the compound wrap in here. And then finishing up this hexagon, I can leave this as a pleat overlap and just make sure that I'm spinning it all the way around so that my pleats are continuing straight as they lay down flat. And again, this is the easiest way to start this ring around the center. It might not be the way that we do the next edges. Flipping over, I've got that compound wrap that's going to turn into a rhombus twist. And by the way, if you'd like to learn even more about the pseudo tiling breaks and get more tiling diagrams for yourself, I think there's certainly over a dozen, maybe 20 tiling diagrams inside of Tessellation Academy. I do also have a topic on the pseudo tiling breaks themselves. So now I have this overlap here. I need to figure out how to resolve it. And I'm going to start by resolving it in the simplest way possible and then evaluate if I can do anything else. So I had this pleat from the rhombus going through first. I realized I just moved without talking you through, but basically I'm opening it up. I know that the next rhombus, whether it's being folded right now or not, is going to need that valley fold going straight to the closed hexagon hole. So I can set up a triangle wrap above and a triangle wrap below to satisfy those pleats. And I can notice if I were to finish this rhombus, that's going to cause all kinds of issues. So I'm just going to not do that. I'll tuck that pleat under and it will wait for later. Then flipping over, I can squash this triangle wrap into a closed triangle twist. One of the giveaways that I knew in advance that I wouldn't be able to fold that rhombus twist is it's coming off of the hexagon that I just completed. And that hexagon takes all the space in that single layer that we're adding. So there's no room for an additional twist on top of the hexagon on the pleats that were new. So coming back over here, I just did this triangle twist. If I want to keep moving this way, I need to do something on this pleat. And that is going to end up being, well, I can take a look. These two rhombi are in the same orientation as these two rhombi. This pleat is coming off of that hole. It's going to be this rhombus, but that doesn't mean we're going to fold the rhombus entirely immediately. It just means that the valley fold of the rhombus is going that way. And so we can set up a three-way intersection. Notice this is setting us up for a pair of rhombus twists in the next ring around the center. And then we can either flip the paper over and say, okay, I need a new triangle twist in there, like so. Goodness, this grid is fighting me a bit. And that's a triangle wrap in there. Which, by the way, is why I had that pleat from the triangle above the half hexagon tube, because I needed to wrap around it, and that would not have been very easy if it was stuck underneath. And then I can come over here and say, okay, this triangle wrap is feeding into a rhombus that I can actually complete because I actually already have the pleat going out this way. I just need one crossing this way, and I was going to work more on these pleats anyways. And so I can open up the half hexagon tube to put in this rhombus, and I'm doing a triangle wrap underneath, and I can close that back up. So on the back side, this looks like this. So we're adding a fourth pleat to the half hexagon tube, just kind of shifting things around so it lays down flat. And then I can squash this rhombus. So notice what I said earlier about starting the set of parallel pleats with the half hexagon tube, not always being the case necessarily. That's how we're doing it this time. And now that hexagon is the next thing to work on. And I can go ahead and set up the 2 remaining pleats and rotate all the way around. And I'm back to a flat state. And then flipping over, I can open up. It's a bit of a painful overlap to open, and I'll show in the next set of parallel pleats how to avoid that painful open. And flipping over, that is a triangle twist to squash. So there's still variations on how to continue putting in those twists, but we now know which twists are getting added. We can see these full hexagons, we can see everything in between. And so I could say, hey, I want to just go ahead and do my triangle on this side. I know that the rhombus on the other side is just going to be a wrap anyways. And so I can go ahead and do that. I can have my valley coming into there. I picked that specifically more because the valley would hit one space away from this corner and bring this whole thing over. And by the way, I get a triangle wrap here too. So I'm kind of going through this cycle with each ring around the center of identify what needs to go there, see what's in this ring, what's not in this ring. And then now in the next sets of parallel pleats, I'm going through and optimizing, saying, okay, these were the wraps or pleat overlaps that were hardest to open. What can I do to avoid those? What can I do to avoid flipping the paper over more than necessary? And so now when I put in this hexagon twist, I can also go ahead and say, well, I need this triangle over here too, and the triangle wrap underneath. And that triangle can lay down flat for the time being and get that hexagon rotated around. And then boom, already we can squash this triangle and we have that wrap for the next rhombus already in place. And then we can start to speed things up and say, okay, I can stay on this side, get another wrap for another rhombus, get my new triangle to complete the cluster. And then flip over and find that fourth rhombus around the hexagon. And so I didn't even need to come to this side of the paper to put in these 2 triangle wraps. And flip. And with the hexagon, also say, I am going to need this triangle too. And then I can have a triangle wrap under there. So the triangle wrap is this bit under here. And rotate and squash. and squash the triangle because it's already set up. And then rinse and repeat. Find the next triangle twist and triangle wrap underneath. Triangle wrap on the far side. Squashing over lots of layers there. And so we're still creating pleat overlaps, and we're still resolving pleat overlaps, but we're kind of streamlining a lot of the process. And this is the part that will be more particular to each individual tessellation. And it looks like we're even going to get another ring around the center. So this is actually going to be quite a long tutorial. And that's fine. And one thing that I didn't mention yet is that when I'm folding my tessellations, I always have an idea of how the border is going to come out. Now with practice pieces, that's not so important. I just use a standard grid and go for it. But for full-scale pieces, like the one I'm working on here, or the one I was showing earlier, I generally know, okay, this is gonna go to this many repeats around the center, and the edge is gonna line up with those repeats. And one thing that you'll notice about both of these patterns, actually, is I'm folding all the way to the edge. I'm not leaving a pleated border. I often prefer to leave a pleated border, but it wasn't possible with these patterns because of the tiling, that arrangement of shapes that I'm using to also tell me what the layers of twists are. So these tilings are useful for design. They're useful for planning how much of your pattern you're going to fit on a certain amount of grid, or rather planning what kind of border you can reasonably achieve with a particular pattern. And they're also useful for figuring out the actual sequence of folding. So there's lots going on with the tiling, and basically the conditions that are true to use pseudo tiling breaks are the same conditions that are true to fold all the way to the edge of the paper instead of having a pleated border. Basically, in both of those cases, you're going to have, and by the way, I'm reaching the end of this loop around the center, ring around the center, however you want to say it. And so I'm finding that third triangle in the group, just like we found the third triangle in the group in previous situations. And that'll get me all the way around. But anyways, I was saying the conditions where you have nice pleated borders are when you have tiling breaks that go straight through the pattern on shape edges instead of cutting through shapes like we're doing here. So it looks like we can fit one more ring around the center. And I've got this set of parallel pleats. I've got 1, 2, second one's underneath there, 3, 4, 5. So you'll notice with each ring around the center, I have an extra pleat to work with. And these are kind of annoying in the way, but I'm gonna have to just deal with that for a little bit. And these are all stacked on top of each other. So how to deal with this? The first thing I'm gonna do is set up a wrap in here, and I'm noticing that I'm noticing that I can't lay down this next rhombus as a triangle wrap. So that's enough information to go ahead and fold the whole rhombus. You gotta be careful with the edge of the paper. I just caught it with my bone folder and ripped a bit. And then that triangle wrap in there needs to be a triangle twist, and I'm going to open up just the closest pleat to put in a compound wrap so that triangle twist can stand up and squash without taking other layers with it. And since that was a compound wrap, that needs to be a rhombus twist, a whole rhombus. But I can't really fold the whole rhombus when there's a valley fold running straight through one side and preventing anything else from happening. So I'm going to have to set up the next rhombus twist as well, and this is rhombi in different orientations, and I'll go ahead and use my trick of this layer that looks closely tied. Doesn't have to be. That is actually free to move. For the next set of parallel pleats, I'll go ahead and add the third rhombus as well, and then we don't have to deal with any of that. And now when I open this up and I pop that corner of the rhombus up, that's going to immediately feed into a triangle wrap and the next rhombus twist. So sometimes in these flagstone bits, you end up needing to fold more twists at the same time just to get things happy with being folded. But in general, you can get away with folding one twist plus wraps at a time. And then we're going to squash these two triangle twists that were needed between the pairs of rhombi. And now we're on to the next set of parallel pleats. This is a pleat from a pointy corner of a rhombus. And one of the rules with this pattern is, that I mentioned at the beginning, is the through line goes to the hexagon, or on the other side to a triangle. This rhombus already has the other side at a triangle, so this one's going to a hexagon. So that's something to be aware of as we take the next pleat and set up a whole rhombus twist. So this is going to a hexagon. I can go ahead and pop down, and I can either make it happen from this side or look at the other side and say, I have 2 pleats going into my hexagon. I'm going to do something very similar to the half hexagon tube and just lay that down. And then come over here and squash my rhombus twist. And I did a triangle wrap to make that happen. So I'm going to come over here and take just the first pleat that I encounter and put in a compound wrap. And then flip back. And this is where I have 1, 2, 3 rhombus twists. I'm going to mark the central diamond of these 2. This guy is with a compound wrap, so that central diamond's not sitting on top. And it's going to be easiest to work with the layers that are on top first. To set up this one, and then unwrap that whole thing. And pop up. It is not really wanting to cooperate, but that's fine. I shall make it cooperate. And so we have the triangle wrap with the single depth pleat here between the 2 rhombi that are in the same direction. And we have the triangle wrap with the double depth pleat between the 2 rhombi that are in different directions. And then I like to start the squash on all 3 before I press any of them down super hard. And then I can go in with my bone folder and smooth everything out. So that is how we're going to be finishing this ring around the center. And let's see what would happen. So we got around the corner. And I'll just show one more edge and then show options for finishing off. We could leave it with this slightly pleated border, and that's a perfectly fine way to finish this. But there are other options that involve folding partial twists that we can also explore. So one of the things that I noticed on the last set of repeats is that when I had this layer on top, it was a lot easier to fold the wrap in here. So I'm talking specifically about the triangle wrap right there. And then this is feeding into that next hexagon twist, and I can pop over here to say, okay, these two mountain folds are coming into the hexagon, but they're going to be back rotated to get everything flat. And then I can come back to squash my rhombus twist. And I must say, I did not plan very explicitly for how this would end up. It's very satisfying that we get whole stars and whole Penrose triangles with 32 grid divisions. And opening her up, I'm going to put in a compound wrap. And again, that's only opening the first pleat that I encounter. With all of these wraps, it's always just on the first pleat that you encounter. And flip over, and here I have those 3 rhombi that all kind of need to go in place at the same time. We saw some slight exceptions to that the first time that I put them in, where you could do the 2 that are in different directions first and then add the 3rd. I'm going to layer that how I want it to eventually be. But basically, having the 3 is easier to access all of them when you go to squash. And flipping over, we can squash both of those triangle twists. And then we've seen how this ring is going to work its way around. I don't feel a huge need to come all the way to the end. Basically, when you do get back to where you started, instead of this pleat going under an existing rhombus to form the hexagon, you're going to do a compound wrap, or just go ahead and set up that partial hexagon tube as you're folding that group of 3 rhombi. So that's what's going on with this pattern. And yeah, there's a lot to learn here, a lot to practice. Star Power is a fairly difficult pattern, and like I said at the very beginning, it is worthwhile to look and see, like, okay, what are the moves? What are the thought processes of how I'm finding what moves to do? And then have those in your head already when you go to fold the pattern. So happy folding, everyone. Enjoy this pattern. I'm looking forward to seeing how everyone folds their own versions in whatever colors and lighting. And I've seen people paint their tessellations before or after they fold it. And if you want the crease pattern for this particular design, that is in the Advent of Tess 2022 ebook. And I'll make sure there's a link to that. But if you go to Gathering Folds and go to Crease Patterns, it is definitely very visible on that site. So gatheringfolds.com, if I didn't say that. So yeah, enjoy Star Power. I did mention when we had just finished the first 6 rhombi that there is an alternative pattern that looks very similar, and that's the one that I'll be talking about a lot on Instagram and Facebook this week. It's called parallax, and basically, instead of having these groups of 3 triangles, you would do a double depth triangle twist using the double depth pleat from between the 2 rhombi. And yeah, that has its own interesting challenges because you basically have to fold 3 rhombi and half a hexagon, if not 6 rhombi and a whole hexagon at the same time. So there's definitely bigger challenges out there. And with the pseudo tiling breaks, definitely go back and look at that diagram that I threw up towards the beginning for, okay, if you want explicit instructions of how these shapes are fitting in those layers around the center, you can take a look at that. And then I just remembered I was going to show some other options that you can do with this structure. Which I have a whole folder of, not counting ones that I probably have framed. So yeah, like I was saying, you can have the hexagon and rhombus on the same side with just the triangles on the other side. This is an advent of test pattern. This one is also an advent of test pattern, where you can have it spaced further apart with open rhombi and closed triangles. You can do open rhombi and open hexagons and get these like really cool spirally fireworky shapes. You can have the hexagon on the same side as the rhombus with very dense spacing, and you still see these clusters of 3 triangles, but now they're right next to the next cluster of 3. You can have those same kind of spinner setups with open triangle twists. Now this is a bit harder because you have these overlapping triangle twists. It's kind of crazy. Spinning saws, I would say, is the kind of intro version of this structure where you have the hexagon and then the rhombus at tube pleat spacing and then an open triangle twist. You could also do a closed triangle twist. It's just emphasizing. And then with the open triangle, you get that nice hexagonal outline, which is cool. Yeah, closed hexagon with open rhombi and then closed triangles on the back. There's just so many options. Also, you can have the same start that we did and then use open triangle twists and have them like varying degrees of overlapping. So if you want to like really go nuts with it, this one's called Stellar Cells. This is Lens Garden, the pattern that I mentioned earlier that has those open hexagon twists, which you can mitigate with wraps instead of doing half hexagons. But one of the things that I started doing recently is instead of trying to wrap away your hexagons, and these are weird hexagons, they're double depth open hexagons. I just set them up as a trapezoid and then don't crease the long edge, which works pretty well, has worked for getting me here. And let's see, so this is spacing further apart using the same twist that we used today. Spacing further apart from the hexagon. Could also add space between these pairs of rhombi. And this is another copy of the butcher paper one that I showed earlier, but misaligned. So here I did not manage to get those repeats spinning saws aligned with the edge like I wanted, and it was a rotated grid, so my problem was I started on the wrong side of the paper. At least I'm pretty sure that was my problem. But yeah, there's all kinds of different patterns that you can fold with this technique. And it doesn't, the technique of like adding just one layer and leaving some twists set up as triangle wraps instead of folding them all the way to rhombi is not unique to this structure. It's extremely general, and having an awareness of the tiling that you're using, the arrangement of shapes, can help you identify, okay, this is in the layer, this is beyond the layer that I'm adding right now, and really helps minimize pleat overlaps. So happy folding, everyone. Have fun with star power. Almost start to see the backlighting. I can make us see the backlighting with some light. It's a fun little pattern. And yeah, those rectangle holes are very surprising if you don't know what's going on the back. So enjoy, happy folding. And I will see you next time when I will be folding another pattern in this structure with hybrid hexagon twists. All right, happy folding, everyone, and see you next week.